Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a plague that wipes out nearly a quarter of an entire nation's livestock, causing food prices to just skyrocket. Now, this isn't some story from a history book. This is what's been happening in the Philippines with African swine fever. But, it's also a story about a really bold comeback plan, a serious scientific test, and some unlikely four-legged heroes at the very heart of it all. So let's dive into how this devastating virus led to a truly groundbreaking study and what it all means for the future of our food. So our story really kicks off back in 2019. That's when African swine fever, or ASF for short, was first detected in the Philippines. And look, this wasn't just another animal disease. No, this was a full-blown crisis that went from a local problem to a national emergency in what felt like the blink of an eye, putting the entire swine industry on the brink. The impact was just staggering. I mean, look at this number. In just 4 years, the country lost nearly a quarter of its entire pig population. Let that sink in for a second. Behind that number are real families, whole communities, a way of life that was suddenly at risk. We're talking millions of animals lost, which just completely upended the livelihoods of countless farmers. And of course, a crisis on the farm very quickly becomes a crisis at the dinner table. With millions fewer pigs, the supply chain was just crushed. So what happens? The farm gate price, that's basically the price farmers get for their animals, it shot up by more than 50%. And that massive price hike, well, it trickles right down to you and me, hitting everyone's wallet and threatening the country's food security. So what exactly is this virus we're talking about? Well, African swine fever is incredibly contagious among pigs, and it's almost always deadly. The mortality rates are close to 100%. Now, the good news, if there is any, is that it's no threat to humans. But the bad news? For any country that relies on pork, it is an absolute economic catastrophe. To really get a handle on the scale of this problem, we need to zoom in on one critical region, the province of Batangas. See, this isn't just any old province. It's a powerhouse. It produces 8% of the entire country's pork. So when ASF hit Batangas, and hit it hard in early 2020, it sent shockwaves through the entire national supply chain. Faced with this total disaster, the Philippine government knew it had to do something. They rolled out a national strategy, a really ambitious one, called the National ASF Prevention and Control Program. And at the very heart of it was this detailed, methodical plan to help farms clean up and, most importantly, safely bring pigs back. Okay, so let's break down how this 90-day plan actually works. It's a really strict 3-phase protocol. First up, you have a 30-day rest period. This is all about intense cleaning and disinfection. Then you move into a 20-day downtime, where the now empty farm is tested for any trace of the virus. And then comes the final and most critical step, a 40-day period where a few Sentinel pigs are brought in. Think of them as living, breathing virus detectors. And yeah, you can see the whole process laid out really clearly here. Notice the different phases, the specific checkpoints along the way. You can see how they start with things like environmental swabs in phase 2, but then in phase 3, they're actually taking samples directly from those Sentinel pigs. It's a serious, multi-layered safety check. Now, a plan on paper is one thing. It can look great, but the real question is, does it actually work out there in the real world? Well, that's exactly what a team of researchers decided to find out. They went right to the front lines in Batangas to put this national comeback plan under the microscope and see if it held up. And we're not talking about some small, quick test here. This study was incredibly thorough. They monitored 145 different farms as they went through the protocol. And, this is super important, they included both the small, family-run backyard farms and the big commercial operations, because they needed to see if the plan worked for everyone. Which brings us to it, the million-dollar question at the heart of all this. After all of that effort, the cleaning, the scrubbing, the testing, the waiting, did the government's plan actually work? Was it successful in keeping that devastating virus from coming back? So, what did they find? Well, the verdict wasn't a simple yes or no. The data actually painted a much more complex picture. One of really high success, yeah, but also with some critical flaws. And it all pointed to a very surprising hero in this whole fight. All right, here's the headline number. The comeback plan had over a 90% success rate, and that is fantastic news. It means for the vast majority of farms that followed the rules, they stayed free of the virus. But what about that other little slice of the pie, that almost 10%? Because that slice, that nearly 10% failure rate, that's where the most important lesson is hiding. Why did some farms still get hit with the virus again after doing all that work? Well, the researchers found that the answer came down to how they were testing for it. And this right here, this is the core finding of the entire study. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it's powerful. The environmental swabs, the high-tech, lab-based approach, they were actually not very good at finding the virus, only catching it about 20% of the time. But the Sentinel pigs? By testing their samples, the detection rate shot up to a massive 89%. These living animals were way, way better at sniffing out the virus than any cotton swab. I mean, don't just take my word for it. The researchers spelled it out perfectly right here. They said the effectiveness of these sentinel animals surpasses the efficacy of environmental sampling alone. In other words, these pigs weren't just a backup plan, they were the most reliable, most important tool in the entire box. The study also found that the risk wasn't spread out evenly. If you look at this map of Batangas, one area in particular, the municipality of San Juan, really stands out. It had the most farms in the study, and more importantly, it had the most failures. This immediately flags it as a potential hotspot, an area that needs way more attention. So why does one study in one province in the Philippines matter to the rest of the world? Well, because the lessons they learned the hard way here could be a blueprint for how we manage and recover from these kinds of devastating agricultural diseases everywhere. So the study gives us some really clear, actionable recommendations. First and foremost, trust the sentinel animals. They are your best detectors, period. Second, focus your resources on those high-risk hotspots like San Juan. Third, get rid of the slow paper records and build a digital system so you can trace outbreaks in real time. And finally, you have to look at the human factors, like how traders move around, and make sure your strategies actually fit what's happening on the ground. And that really leaves us with one final big question. The fight in Batangas is like a small-scale version of a much larger global challenge. As animal diseases, both new and old, keep threatening our food security, the real test is going to be, how can we take these hard-won lessons from a local fight and turn them into solutions that work for the entire world?